What's up everybody, my name is Ethan and today I'm here again with another YouTube video for the Ethan's Culture Box. And today it's gonna be very fun, especially because we're going to talk about a very specific topic called the trendiness, or just trend culture in general in South Korea. Because the coverage of this video is already really extensive enough, I guess, I believe that we're only going to cover the South Korean part instead of juxtaposing with the German part, just like I did on the previous videos. So stay tuned for other German videos describing the cultures of Germany. But until now, let's just focus on South Korea and dive into this very interesting and intricate topic. Let's go. One example is shown in the domain of sports, in the area of sports, especially soccer. And this dates back to 2002, where South Korea united all together and enjoyed this very unique and specific experience and moment of, I think, as I remember, reaching the semifinals or something for the World Cup. You know, the World Cup 2002 was held in South Korea, I guess along with Japan, so this was actually a moment where the group morale got boosted and skyrocketed. And even my parents, if I talk to them, who has experienced this thing live and offline where I wasn't born, they recall this moment as a moment of union where everybody cheered and supported the same group, the same team, wore the same clothes. And this, of course, leads to our topic, to trends, because back then it was kind of a trend to wear a certain type of clothes resembling the Red Devil, the 붉은악마. And that was basically the name for the football team or football supporters of the Korean national team. And they used to wear merges and clothes with the iconic red color, which represents basically our national soccer football team. So yeah, that was one mentionable, very notable and significantly Korean trend. And of course, this led to multiple different types of marketing gimmicks, because obviously companies would want to use this trend that was so significant back then, because it was actually, the atmosphere was actually festive and exceptionally enjoying and joyful. And so this is one example of a very notable trend that describes the culture of South Korea, where when one does something, the others follow, and or because of a certain event or a significant, let's say, situation, everybody tends to do something similar and something in a very uniquely united way. Another of such kind of trendy event was not that long ago, but it was around 2017 or 2018, where we had the Winter Pyeongchang Olympics. Now, South Korea also had this very big and gigantic event, especially for athletes and, let's say, sportsmen or sportswomen. And this was a moment where this fashion trend boomed, which was the long padding trend. Now, this long padding is still kind of famous these days, maybe not as much as then, but back then it was actually mind-blowing. So back then what happened essentially is, if you go out and just look around during winter, of course, when it was snowy or when it was extremely cold and freezing, everybody you see in the streets or in schools or in your companies or at work or anywhere, essentially, they were wearing this one pair of with this one fashion item, which is the long padding. Now, this long padding is like this very long jacket that basically reaches almost until your shin, or like your foot or your ankles, and it is indeed very protecting against extreme freezing cold weather. And yeah, that was one movement where when one started it, or let's say some types of influencers or marketing strategies sparked one movement, and everybody tend to follow it, especially also because of its effectiveness and its efficacy as a cloth itself, but especially because others do it and you just want to hop on the trend and, let's say, share this feeling of union and, let's say, like a positive way of peer pressure. Another archetype of what is truly Korean in terms of the trendiness is related with food, with what you consume. And one very specific example of that is, for example, 마라탕 or 탕후루 or 속덕속덕. These things are foods or, let's say, kind of dishes or sometimes even just little snacks that you can buy and eat in certain places, in certain shops, in certain restaurants. And it is especially highlighted and gained its fame and became renowned due to TV programs, celebrities, and online social media, those type of stuffs. And it also had a significant impact. When one tried it and said it was amazingly good and tasty, well, others wanted to try it too. So at one point, almost everybody had tried it, and it was kind of weird that you didn't try it. Or everybody was kind of, let's say, indirectly pressured to try it as well as a part of the trendiness culture. And other examples are, for example, these days there's this such thing called yoajong, which is like essentially a yogurt ice cream that you can order or eat right there at the shop. Or there are these things called like Dubai chocolates and stuff where you like actually go to Dubai or buy some kind of type of chocolate. I'm not really into, or let's say my knowledge and like experience is not specialized in that field, but that's what I heard and that's what I found out through research. So that's another example of South Korean trend. Other examples are actually ones that are just more than consumptions or products that are tangible. These are things that actually shape communication and the linguistic or the language culture. For instance, there was this emerging trend in my generation or in the younger generations where people would just shorten up or abbreviate almost every single word that they have, right? Just like we abbreviate like terms like thank you to TY or those stuffs, it was more than that. It was not only just that, it was more than that. It was just taking random words, like sampling them together, creating meaning, and then just abbreviating with by taking its front letters, for instance. So it was very complex to understand, even for the younger generations, even for me. I probably know only very few of them. But yeah, so for instance, like what these words include 얼주가, or like extremely childish ones like 킹받네 or 어쩔 TV 저쩔 TV. Like these things are examples of these new words created due to this abbreviation culture and trend. And these are the words that we mainly call as 신조어, which basically translated means new words, or new words for the youth, and so on and so forth. And yeah, so these were trends that people started to use, and it was kind of hard for other generations to understand because it does kind of feel like a very own secret and restrictive language where others cannot access or have the same level of knowledge and intellect to it. So that was one trend where people started to use words, others followed, kind of had a significant impact in the South Korean language. So that's interesting too, when thinking about how big of an influence trend can make, especially in South Korea, and especially in this, let's say, societal structure and framework where that is indeed easily possible due to the fast spreading and virality. I'll talk about that later more specifically, so stay tuned. There was also this one very interesting trend that is still shaping the way we communicate, meet new people, and build connections with people that we haven't known before. And that is this trend called MBTI personality testing. This was, I guess, really popular several years ago, 5 years. It still is, and there are still constant posts in social media, for instance, regarding this topic. And yeah, people are now essentially characterizing people and describing other people's personalities or their own personality with this scheme and with this structure, which is let's say a study or like an experiment done by a scientist back then, or a psychologist, who would try to describe personalities in terms of 4 distinct categories and letters. So my MBTI is ENTJ, and you can basically have any types of MBTIs within the 16 MBTI types. So it was an interesting way of, let's say, characterizing a person, and the descriptions that you found in those websites and the testing online sites were also very accurate, which I think resonated with lots of people, and people could empathize with it, and so on and so forth. So yeah, this is something that everybody almost uses as a sort of an icebreaker, or a sort of a way that you can continue on a communication or a conversation with a person that you've met newly. So that's another example of MBTI, or of, let's say, trend. Sometimes the trendiness and the trend culture of South Korea extends and goes a little beyond. It transcends more than just these kind of marketing gimmicks or products or consumptions or words or MBTI or those social phenomena. It can even lead to sharing, spreading, and imitating of a certain belief and virtue or philosophical thought and perspective on lives. Now this does kind of look like or sound like a very, very deep and profound thing, and it sometimes is. And one example of that, or one example of such intellectually connected trend, was this trend, or this kind of situation where people started to use this word called 가tsing. 가tsing literally means a life like God, which is implied, or as long as I remember, as far as I know, which basically gets inferred as a life where you constantly grind, where you actually lock in. And I think this was very popular in the COVID pandemics, where people started to use this time that they had during the pandemic to self-improve, to, let's say, be in this flow state of improvement and grind and dream, let's say, achievement. So yeah, that was one example of a very profound, deep, and psychological movement that inspired and had a positive impact and influence in many people, including me. And I am a person who truly enjoys living 가tsing. So, I mean, you only live once, and therefore, I believe it's very unregretful and amazing to just live by doing what you love, by doing what you dream of, by just living your dream, just working on, like, loving the process and stuff, enjoying the grind basically, and having this small moments of happiness, right? So yeah, as you can see, even I got influenced and got, let's say, joined by the trend of this 가tsing life perspective. Now I believe that it's really important to talk about the cause, why such trend emerges, why the trend culture in South Korea is, let's say, more excessive and compelling, forceful than other cultures and other countries, and why Korea is well known and characterized for that culture too. I believe that one example can be explained by the demographic distribution. So in South Korea, the centralization problem is very high, or very important, and it's one of those key topics where we really are aware of the problem, and we really do have to find a solution for it. And that problem is that South Korea is centered around big cities, especially Seoul. And since almost like the majority of population are living in Seoul, instead of living in different cities in landly places, countrysides, rural areas, and suburban areas, people are just only living in these like highly urban areas. And therefore, one assumption that I could make, an interpretation I could make, is that because of this centralized group, what this means in terms of sociological and cultural view is the transfer of information and ideas and these proposals, suggestions for let's say a dance or a food or a new movie or a new K-pop dance or a movie or like Korean film such as 오징어 게임 or Parasite. These informations get transferred and recommended very quickly, offline and online, in both ways. And because you can also execute it very quickly and like realize it, do it by yourself, experience it by yourself, and then talk to other people, other friends in your surroundings. This is enabled and facilitated and accelerated, which leads to this extreme virality in a very short period of time, which results in this trend that is very sensitive and rapidly changing. And this becomes sometimes very strong, as I say, which results in a point where although you want to resist, you can't because of this peer pressure type of phenomenon. It becomes so prevalent, so compelling that you kind of feel like you're isolated and not part of the, let's say, in crowd when you don't do it or when you haven't tried a certain thing. Because I mean, it is a natural psychological and human phenomena that you cannot always necessarily empathize with things that you haven't tried before. And this becomes very clearly evident with trends. And of course, if you have an inspiring and truly amazing and courageous ability to withstand that pressure and just go on your own way, then that is of course possible. But I'm just saying that it is sometimes very hard and difficult to do so, which is also another cause of why this Korean trend culture emerged. Now, since we've talked about the cause for it, let's briefly talk about the pros and cons. So the negative and positive implications and effects it can have in the people that live in South Korea. So one thing is very paradoxical, it's very contradicting. And that is because this culture of trend is essentially designed to bring people together, to unite people. However, what actually happens very often is a stronger and deepened divide between generations. And this happens because, as you can see, many things are shared through social media. Many trends are these days especially emerging in TikTok or Instagram and so on and so forth. And that's why, first of all, the older generations have limited access to these kind of new trends. Or even if they do, they kind of catch up late on it, and then the trend's already gone. So that creates a divide where youth live their own kind of trendy lives, where the older people get kind of isolated and cannot really participate it as a group and have fun while doing it together. And secondly, this generational gap is visible even not only because of the technology and the social media, this tool called technology and apps and platforms. Another reason is because, for example, when talking about the language things, the new abbreviation examples of trends that I already talked about briefly in the beginning, you can see how older generations cannot really understand what the younger generations are doing. And that is kind of natural and obvious if a trend is set to, and if the topic itself is limited to people in the, for example, the MZ generation. So if you look around, you can see how older people often don't understand what the youth are talking about, what the Gen Zs in the companies are talking about, what the interns are talking about. They're living in their own world with their own native language, kind of like that. And what I'm talking about is not an age gap of 20, 30 years. Even this kind of age gap can even emerge in 5 years of age difference, 3 years of age difference. Like, even I don't understand what the kids are doing, right? Or are talking about. Like, I don't understand, or I haven't had enough, let's say, exposure to what they view and what they think is cool, or what they see and view as trends that they follow, that they have joy with, basically. So this kind of phenomenon of extremely trendy culture can result in psychological damage of many people, many celebrities, many important people that shape our society, right? Because everybody in the world have their own value, uniqueness, and beauty in the world, and their presence itself is just very very important and significant. So one example of that is do this trendiness where one person does something, everybody basically gathers and does it, and then when somebody shifts, everybody shifts together with it. And this happens, for example, for the cancel culture, where if one celebrity does something really good, people glaze them, like literally glaze them so hard in comments, in social media, and so on and so forth. But things get extremely radical and they just turn around 360 degrees or 180 degrees when they do something questionable, when they happen to be affiliated with something that basically makes you kind of question or concern, or let's say not like that person anymore. And that is sometimes so radical. This change and this hatred, the hate speech revolving around social media becomes so radical that we have already experienced many people committing suicide within 2-3 years. So many people have committed suicide and unfortunately lost their lives through this, let's say, extreme pressure and extremely criticizing view of others. So although of course there may be reasons for such harsh criticism, I believe that it is of course not good, especially for the group morale psychology and for the future celebrities and so on and so forth, to overly criticize and to enjoy the participation in bringing people down, in trying to ruin other people's lives, and being addicted to the cancel culture. And I honestly see, and as many people say also in online world, I see a sign of the future where we get addicted to the cancel culture and where canceling people's lives and their hard work and even through deaths, canceling people's entire existence becomes prevalent and addictive. And I believe that that's one negative effect of this type of trendy culture, and should be of course mitigated or somehow alleviated. Now, since we've talked about the negative stuff, let's talk about the positive stuff. Let's transition, switch up, and then talk about the benefits or pros it can have. Now, those trends can have a very beneficial effect in the society by, for instance, improving various aspects of the citizens or the people living in South Korea. And that is, for example, visible or becomes evident and legitimate if you see, for example, this MBTI trend that I mentioned beforehand. And I already said that it's a scheme and system of understanding people's personalities and minds, right? This had, in my opinion, and through various studies and researches or people's claims, it has been shown that it had a very significant impact in how people tend to view and understand and thoroughly examine and scrutinize their own personalities, how they get to understand themselves better, and how they became more empathetic towards others with a certain personality type, and how people got to know the essence of human personality better, which of course had a very positive psychological impact in the individual's minds, and therefore also as a collective mind. And another aspect that this trend culture could aid South Korea is it actually helps or has helped the South Korea's reputational growth, economy, and so on and so forth. For instance, this kind of culture where people really just focus on one thing and move on and so forth and so on. There are many economic benefits of that. For instance, if you see K-pop industries or K-film industry, K-fashion, K-food winning awards such as Grammys or I don't know, Oscars and stuff, such as Parasite or BTS and so on and so forth, you can see how Korea has benefited enormously from that in terms of economy, right? These emerging K culture is becoming widespread globally, not only domestically within South Korea. It's expanding its fandom and group and audience, customers to the entire world, which has, of course, a natural gain in profit. It becomes more lucrative, in short. And another example of that reputational growth is also stemming from that, right? If we become more aware from various countries. South Korea, which became very successful economically and culturally within a short period of time after the independence, we basically are gaining lots of reputational growth and awareness and positive view, which I am, as a Korean, very proud about and very, let's say, happy about, right? Something that you can be glad about. And that's one example that is very patriotic for a culture, for this trendy culture, right? So, yeah, this trendy culture fulfills one aspect, such as that too. Now, to conclude, I want to basically say that this culture of trendiness is very useful and advantageous. It's also risky too, but if we deliberately use and fine-tune how we are going to use it, then we are going to be able to benefit from it. And that's, for example, because it can boost the kindness, spread morals, and, let's say, raise awareness of certain viewpoints, or light up and kind of highlight certain voices or speech which may be neglected or left alone without getting the shine of light of the audience and the public and the customers. And one example is, for example, I've seen videos of content creators these days trying to make this picking up trash and preventing littering as a trend, where children and their, let's say, followers start to also imitate the act of picking up trash in the streets and trying to make the South Korean environment better and trying to reduce the work for the people who manage and organize and clean up the streets for the beautiful cityscape, basically, and the streets that are organized and cleaned up. So I believe that that's an example, a perfect archetype of what a trend must actually look like. And another example is, for instance, another video content where a person starts to walk around the streets and spread affirmation or affirmative comments and words, or do kind of small talk with the aim and the goal to reduce this South Korean culture or this type of stereotype that is actually existent, where South Korean people are suspicioning and very, let's say, sometimes unfriendly or not willing and reluctant to speak with random people in the streets, right? Unlike some of the Americans, for instance, who are very open to such kind of small talks and, let's say, brief engagements in conversations, South Korea especially kind of has a kind of a gap and a distance towards that. So in order to reduce that gap and share more positive words and, let's say, make this thing normal, where we spread kind words to others, where we spread some short interactions with others to gain more experience and human human experience and lives, this is of course a perfect trend as well, where more people could participate and possibly make a significant impact societally in terms of the cultures. So yeah, that was it for today, and well, I'll just see you next time, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye bye. Thank you for watching. 감사합니다. Ciao. Servus.